The envelope fell from Stephen's briefcase like a whisper of betrayal, landing face down on our hardwood floor. I stood frozen in our foyer, my hand still on the doorknob, watching my husband and Mr. Barnes huddle over papers at our kitchen table. Neither had noticed me come home early from work. I'm Juliet, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my family's life. As a social worker, I pride myself on reading people, on sensing when something's off. But sometimes the biggest deceptions happen right under our noses. "We need to move these funds before the audit," Mr. Barnes whispered, his voice carrying through our open-concept home. "The board's getting suspicious." Stephen ran his fingers through his greying hair, a nervous tic I'd grown to love over our 16 years of marriage. "What about the scholarship accounts?" "Already handled. Just make sure you—" Mr. Barnes stopped abruptly as my keys clinked against the ceramic bowl by the door. "Jules!" Stephen's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "You're home early." I forced a smile, noting how quickly they shuffled their papers together. "Budget meeting finished sooner than expected. Hello, Mr. Barnes." "Mrs. Garrett." He nodded, stuffing documents into his leather portfolio. "I was just leaving. Stephen, we'll continue this discussion tomorrow." I watched them exchange a look that made my stomach turn. 15 years of teaching at Riverside High together, and suddenly they couldn't meet my eyes. "Can I get you some coffee before you go?" I offered, moving toward the kitchen. No, Mr. Barnes said quickly. "My wife's expecting me." As he hurried past, I noticed his hands trembling slightly. Stephen walked him to the door, their hushed voices carrying fragments of conversation. "Keep this between us, and handle it discreetly." When the door clicked shut, Stephen turned to me with an artificial brightness. "How about takeout tonight? I'm thinking Thai." "Sure," I said, my mind on the envelope I'd spotted earlier. "Let me just freshen up first." I waited until Stephen went to the bathroom before retrieving the envelope from where it had slid under the credenza. Inside was a bank statement from an account I'd never seen before, with transactions that made my blood run cold. Large transfers to offshore accounts, withdrawals from what appeared to be student scholarship funds. My phone buzzed, a text from my daughter Ella. "Mum, we need to talk. It's about Dad and Mr. Barnes. Don't tell Dad I messaged you." I quickly slipped the envelope back where I'd found it as Stephen's footsteps approached. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. The embrace that had always felt like home now made my skin crawl. "Perfect," I lied, my mind racing with questions. "Just perfect." Through the kitchen window, I watched Mr. Barnes's car pull away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our family's foundation was about to crumble. But first, I needed to hear what my daughter had to say. "Actually," I said, pulling away from Stephen's embrace, "I just remembered I promised to help Ella with her history project. Rain check on dinner?" I found Ella in her room, headphones on, pretending to study. When I closed the door behind me, she immediately pulled them off. "Did you see them?" she whispered, her eyes wide with worry. "Dad and Mr. Barnes?" "I did." I sat on the edge of her bed. "What do you know?" She grabbed her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "First, look at this." She pulled up the school's website, navigating to a page about scholarship funds. "Remember Serena's brother? He was supposed to get the Martinez Memorial Scholarship for college this year. The one for first-generation students." I remembered the excitement when he'd won it. "Yeah, well, he didn't get the money. Neither did any of the other winners." Ella's voice cracked. "Serena's family took out loans instead. They think there was a processing error." My stomach dropped. "How did you find out about this?" "I overheard Mr. Barnes and Dad in the hallway last week. I was staying late for debate club, and they didn't see me around the corner." She pulled out a notebook filled with dates and amounts. "I've been keeping track. The scholarship fund, the band trip money, even the new library donations, it's all disappearing." "Ella, this is—" I trailed off, remembering the bank statement I'd found. "There's more." She lowered her voice further. "Ms. Maeve knows something too. I saw her arguing with Dad yesterday. She looks scared, Mom." A knock at the door made us both jump. "Everything okay in there?" Stephen called out. "Fine, honey," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just helping with that history project." "Well, don't work too hard. It's getting late." We waited until his footsteps faded before continuing. "Mom," Ella grabbed my hand. "What are we going to do?" I squeezed her hand back, my mind racing. "First, I need to talk to someone. My friend Olive works in financial crimes at the DA's office." "Will Dad go to jail?" Ella's voice was small, reminding me she was still just 15, despite her mature handling of the situation. "I don't know, sweetie, but we can't let this continue." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tears dampen my shirt. My phone buzzed, a text from Olive. "Free for coffee tomorrow. Need your advice on something." I replied quickly. "Definitely. Make it early." 7 a.m., our usual spot. Ella pulled away, wiping her eyes. "Mom, there's one more thing." She reached under her mattress and pulled out a small recording device. "I borrowed this from the AV club. I've been thinking about planting it in Dad's office at school." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "It's too risky. Let me handle this." "But Mom, promise me you won't do anything without talking to me first." She nodded reluctantly, but something in her expression made me uneasy. I'd seen that look before, the same determination I often saw in my own reflection. Later that night, lying next to Stephen in bed, I listened to his steady breathing and wondered how many nights he'd slept peacefully while carrying the secret. My phone lit up with another text from Ella. "What if I already started recording?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Whatever came next, there would be no turning back. The recording crackled through Ella's phone speaker as we sat in my parked car outside the coffee shop where I was supposed to meet Olive. "The scholarship money needs to be replaced by Friday," Stephen's voice was clear. "The annual report is due." "Impossible," Mr. Barnes replied. "The investment went south. We lost everything." "Then we'll have to take it from the building fund." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "When did you record this?" "Yesterday." Ella swiped to another file. "But wait, listen to this one." A new voice joined the conversation, Ms. Maeve. "This has to stop. Those kids needed that money." "Keep your voice down," Mr. Barnes snapped. "You're as involved as we are. Remember who signed off on those transfer forms?" "Because you threatened my job." Maeve's voice broke. "I have a sick mother to support." "Ella," I turned to face my daughter. "This is serious evidence. How did you get these recordings?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I put the recorder in the vent above Dad's desk. Serena helped me. She's really good with tech stuff." "You could get in trouble for this. It might not even be admissible." "Mum," Ella interrupted, her eyes fierce. "Serena's brother had to drop out of college. Maria's family lost their house trying to cover tuition. We have to do something." My phone buzzed. Olive was waiting inside. "Stay in the car," I told Ella. "I need to talk to Olive alone first." Inside, Olive was already at our usual corner table. One look at my face and she set down her coffee. "What's wrong?" I pulled out my phone and played the recordings. Olive's expression grew darker with each passing second. "This is bigger than just missing scholarship money," she said finally. "These transactions you mentioned, they cross state lines. That makes it federal." "What about Ella's recordings? Legally questionable, but they give us a direction to investigate." Olive leaned forward. "Jules, are you sure you want to pursue this? It could destroy your family." "Our family's already destroyed," I said, my voice breaking. "Stephen did that himself." Olive squeezed my hand. "Give me 24 hours. I'll make some calls, see what we can build. But Juliet..." Her expression turned serious. "Keep Ella out of this from now on. This kind of case can get ugly fast." I nodded, but when I returned to the car, Ella was on her phone, talking rapidly to someone. "Got to go," she said quickly, hanging up. "Who was that?" "Just Serena." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "So what did Olive say?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Back off if you know what's good for your daughter." Ella peered at my screen, her face paling. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" She pulled up her own phone, showing me a series of threatening messages. "They started coming last night. Someone knows about the recordings." I started the car, my hands shaking. "We're going home right now. You're not going to school tomorrow." "But Mom..." "No buts. This just got dangerous." I pulled out of the parking lot, my mind racing. "We need to get somewhere safe and figure out our next move." "They're not going to stop us," Ella said firmly. "We can't let them." Looking at her determined face, I realized my daughter was right. We'd crossed a line, and there was only one way forward now, straight through the storm. Olive's living room became our war room. Papers, laptops, and empty coffee cups covered every surface as we pieced together the evidence. Ella sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through financial documents with Serena, while I conferenced with Maeve over the phone. "They're watching me," Maeve whispered. "Mr. Barnes had someone follow me home yesterday." "You need to come forward," I urged. "We can protect you." "Like you protected Ella." Her voice turned sharp. "I heard about the threats." A crash from the kitchen made me jump. Olive rushed in, her face flushed. "Turn on the news, now!" The local news anchor's voice filled the room. "Breaking news from Riverside High School, where allegations of financial misconduct have surfaced. Sources claim that over $500,000 in scholarship and development funds have been misappropriated." "It wasn't me," Ella said quickly, seeing my expression. "But check your email." I opened my inbox to find an anonymous message containing detailed bank records, transfer dates, and a list of affected students. The sender had copied every local news outlet and the school board. My phone buzzed with Stephen's call. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom," Ella's voice shook. "Look at this." She held up her phone, showing a social media post from Mr. Barnes. "All allegations are false. Those responsible for spreading malicious rumors will face severe consequences." Serena grabbed Ella's arm. "They're talking about it on the school forum. Someone posted screenshots of text messages between your dad and Mr. Barnes." "What?" I snatched the phone. The messages were recent, from this morning. Stephen was panicking, threatening to expose Mr. Barnes if he didn't fix this. Olive read over my shoulder. "This changes everything. They're turning on each other." My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Maeve. "Meeting Barnes in 30 mins, wearing a wire. Wish me luck." "No." I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. "Jules," Olive gripped my arm. "We need to call this in. Now, before someone gets hurt." I nodded, watching Ella and Serena huddled over their phones, their faces pale. "Girls, pack up. We're going to the police station." "Wait." Serena scrolled through her phone. "The school's announcing an emergency board meeting tonight. My mum's on the board. She says they're voting to suspend Mr. Barnes and your dad." Another text lit up my phone. Stephen again. "Where are you and Ella? We need to talk. Barnes is losing it. He came to the house looking for you." "Mum?" Ella's voice was small. "What do we do?" Before I could answer, Olive's security system chimed. Through the window, I saw Mr. Barnes's car pulling into the driveway. "Back door," Olive commanded, grabbing her keys. "Now." We rushed through the kitchen, just as pounding started at the front door. "I know you're in there," Mr. Barnes shouted. "You have no idea what you've done." Olive ushered us into her garage while calling 911. As her garage door opened, I saw Stephen's car approaching from the other direction. "Get down," I whispered to Ella, pushing her below the dashboard as we pulled out. In the rearview mirror, I watched Stephen and Mr. Barnes converge on Olive's front door. The police were on their way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. Whatever happened next would happen fast, and there would be no going back. The emergency board meeting erupted into chaos the moment the recording started playing. Ella's evidence, now in the hands of every board member, echoed through the school auditorium speakers. "That money was meant for my son." A parent stood up, pointing at Mr. Barnes. "How dare you?" Stephen sat rigid in the front row, his face ashen. When he spotted us entering at the back, he half rose, but board president Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Barnes, Mr. Garrett, please remain seated. The police are on their way." Maeve burst through the side door, clutching a manila envelope. "Wait, there's more." Her hands trembled as she approached the board. "I have proof of everything." Mr. Barnes lunged for her. "You promised to keep quiet." Several teachers moved to restrain him, but not before he knocked the envelope from Maeve's hands, scattering papers across the floor. One floated toward me, a check made out to Maeve, dated 3 months ago, with a memo line reading "consultation fees." "It's not what you think," Maeve cried, seeing my expression. "They were blackmailing me." "Blackmailing you?" I stepped closer. "Or paying you off?" Ella grabbed my arm. "Mum, look." She pointed to her phone, showing me a series of email exchanges between Maeve and Mr. Barnes, dating back 2 years. They weren't just covering up the scandal, they had orchestrated it together. "I trusted you," I said to Maeve. "We all did." "Jules, please." She reached for me, but Stephen's voice cut through the tension. "It was her idea." He pointed at Maeve, desperation in his eyes. She knew about the scholarship fund's poor oversight. She said we could borrow the money, invest it, return it with interest. "Shut up," Mr. Barnes shouted. "All of you, just shut up." Police officers entered through both doors. The room fell silent except for the sound of handcuffs clicking. "Juliet," Stephen called out as they led him past. "Tell Ella I'm sorry, I never meant—" "Save it for your lawyer," the officer said, guiding him away. Ella pressed against my side, her body shaking. Around us, parents hugged their children, some crying, others demanding answers from the shell-shocked board members. My phone buzzed, a text from Olive. "Check your email now." The message contained a video file. I opened it, Ella watching over my shoulder. It showed Maeve in her classroom after hours, counting stacks of cash with Mr. Barnes. "When was this?" I asked Ella. "Last week. Serena planted a camera after we found the first recordings." She looked up at me. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything." Before I could respond, Mrs. Thompson approached us. "Mrs. Garrett, the board would like to speak with you privately, and Ella," she managed a weak smile. "The scholarship committee wants to ensure all affected students receive their promised funds, with interest." As we followed her to the conference room, I noticed Serena giving Ella a thumbs up from across the auditorium. My daughter had orchestrated more than I realized, building a case piece by piece, while the adults around her failed to protect what mattered. "Mom," Ella whispered, "are we going to be okay?" I squeezed her hand, watching Maeve being escorted out in handcuffs, her betrayal still burning in my chest. "We're going to be better than okay. We're going to make things right." But something in Maeve's last desperate look told me we hadn't uncovered everything yet. Not by a long shot. The police interrogation room felt colder than it looked. Maeve sat across from me, her makeup smeared from crying, while Olive observed through the two-way mirror. "Start from the beginning," I said, sliding the photos across the table. "And this time, tell me the truth. You don't understand." Maeve's fingers traced the edge of a picture, showing her at an ATM, withdrawing scholarship funds. "They have my mother." "What?" "Mr. Barnes knows people. Bad people. They're holding my mother's nursing home care over my head." She pulled out her phone, showing me texts. "See? They threatened to have her kicked out, said they'd make sure no facility in the state would take her. That doesn't explain the offshore accounts," I pressed, "or why you helped steal from children." Maeve's face crumpled. "The scholarship money was just the start. Mr. Barnes, he's been running a money laundering operation through the school for years. Stephen discovered it by accident, but instead of reporting it, he joined in," I finished, feeling sick. A knock at the door interrupted us. Olive entered with a fresh stack of documents. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." The papers detailed wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. All trace back to a charity foundation run by Mr. Barnes's wife. "There's more," Olive said. "We found evidence that Maeve was sending coded messages to someone outside the school. Someone high up." Maeve's face went white. "You can't—" "They'll kill her." "Who?" I demanded. Who are you protecting? Before she could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Ella. Mom, come quick. Something's happening at school. Go, Olive said. I'll handle this. I rushed to Riverside High, finding a crowd gathered outside. Ella ran to meet me, pulling me toward the administration building. They're destroying evidence, she said breathlessly. Serena saw them through the window. Mr. Barnes's wife and some men we don't know. I called Olive immediately. Within minutes, police cars surrounded the building, but not before we watched several men exit with boxes of documents. Mrs. Garrett, a voice called out. I turned to see Mrs. Thompson hurrying over. You need to see this. She led us to her office, where she pulled up security footage on her computer. The video showed Maeve meeting with a man in an expensive suit late at night. That's Senator Williams, Ella gasped. He's on the Education Committee. The Charity Foundation, I realized. It was all a front for political kickbacks. Mum, Ella gripped my arm. Look at the date stamp. This was last night, after she was arrested. I leaned closer. How? My phone rang. Olive. Jules, Maeve's gone. She had help escaping custody. And you need to check your email. I opened my inbox to find a message from an anonymous sender. Inside was a video of my daughter at school, recorded earlier that day, along with a simple message. Back off, or next time we won't just watch. Ella peered at my screen, her face hardening. They're trying to scare us. They should be scared of us, I said, forwarding the threat to Olive. Because now we know how high this goes. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. The FBI is here. They want to talk to both of you. As we followed her out, I caught sight of Stephen being led to a police car, his eyes meeting mine briefly. But I felt no sympathy now, only determination. Someone had threatened my daughter, and they were about to learn what a mother was capable of. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as I took the witness stand. Stephen sat with his lawyer, his once proud posture now deflated. Mr. Barnes glared from the defendant's table, while Senator Williams maintained his practiced politician smile. Mrs. Garrett, the prosecutor began, please tell the court when you first became aware of the financial irregularities at Riverside High. I recounted finding the envelope, the whispered conversations, the missing scholarship funds. With each detail, Stephen seemed to shrink further into himself. And the recordings your daughter made? Objection. Stephen's lawyer stood. The recordings were obtained illegally. Overruled, the judge declared. The FBI's subsequent investigation provided independent verification of their contents. I continued testifying, watching the color drain from Senator Williams' face as I detailed the money trail Olive had uncovered. His charity foundation had funneled millions in taxpayer education funds through the school, using the scholarship program as cover. The courtroom door opened, and heads turned as Maeve was led in by FBI agents. She'd been found hiding at her mother's new nursing home. Paid for, we'd discovered, by Senator Williams himself. I have something to say, Maeve announced, her voice shaking. The judge called a brief recess. In the hallway, Ella grabbed my hand. Mom, Serena just texted. They found Mr. Barnes's wife. Before I could respond, Stephen approached us, 2 guards flanking him. Jules, Ella, please. I need you to know. Save it. Ella cut him off. You had years to tell the truth. I was trying to protect you, he pleaded. The senator threatened to ruin us if I talked. You ruined us yourself, I said quietly. The bailiff called us back in. Maeve took the stand, clutching a USB drive. This contains recordings of every meeting, every threat, every payment. Senator Williams didn't just know about the scheme, he designed it. And it's not just our school, there are dozens more. The courtroom erupted. Senator Williams lunged toward Maeve, but FBI agents restrained him. Mr. Barnes began shouting about deals and immunity, while his wife was led in wearing handcuffs. Order! The judge's gavel crashed down. We will have order! Ella squeezed my hand as Maeve's evidence was entered into record. On a screen, videos played showing late-night meetings, cash exchanges, and Senator Williams instructing Mr. Barnes on how to hide the money trails. "One last witness," the prosecutor announced. "We call Ella Garrett to the stand." My daughter walked forward, head high. She described discovering the scandal, gathering evidence, working with Serena to document everything. Her voice never wavered. "Why did you do it?" the prosecutor asked. Ella looked directly at Stephen. "Because someone had to stand up for what's right. Someone had to show that you can't steal people's futures and get away with it." I watched tears roll down Stephen's cheeks as our daughter testified against him. Mr. Barnes had his head in his hands. Senator Williams stared straight ahead, his political mask finally cracking. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury would need little time to deliberate. But as I watched Ella step down from the witness stand, I realized this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about courage, the courage of a 15-year-old girl who refused to let powerful men steal her classmates' dreams. "Mum," Ella whispered as she returned to her seat, "we did it." "No, sweetie," I replied, pulling her close. "You did it." The morning sun streamed through Riverside High's auditorium windows as Serena's brother walked across the stage, finally receiving his scholarship check. The applause was deafening, not just for him, but for all 23 students who'd had their futures restored. "And now," Mrs. Thompson announced, "we have a special presentation from our Student Council President, Ella Garrett." I watched my daughter approach the podium, no longer the scared girl who'd first discovered her father's betrayal, but a confident young woman who'd helped bring down a corrupt system. "Today isn't just about scholarships," Ella began. "It's about accountability. Thanks to the new Oversight Committee, no one will ever again abuse the trust placed in our education system." From my seat, I could see the empty offices where Stephen and Mr. Barnes once worked. Senator Williams's conviction had made national headlines, exposing similar schemes across 3 states. Maeve's testimony had helped reduce her sentence, though she'd never teach again. "Mom," Ella waved me forward. "Come up here." I joined her at the podium as she continued. "My mother taught me that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always necessary. That's why we're announcing the new Integrity Scholarship, funded by the recovered money and dedicated to students who demonstrate moral courage." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Serena rushed forward to hug Ella, both girls crying and laughing. "Mrs. Garrett?" a quiet voice behind me. I turned to find Stephen's replacement, the new English teacher. "There's someone who'd like to speak with you." In the hallway, Stephen waited with his attorney. Prison hadn't been kind to him, but his eyes were clear. "I'm not staying," he said quickly, seeing my expression. "I just needed to tell you both something." Ella joined us, keeping her distance. "The divorce papers," he continued. "I signed them, and I'm giving you everything. The house, my pension, all of it. It's blood money anyway." "Dad," Ella started. "No, let me finish. What you did standing up to all of us, it showed me who you really are, who your mother raised you to be. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be." He handed me an envelope. "This is my confession. Everything I didn't say in court. Every name, every scheme. Use it to help the FBI find the rest." "Why now?" I asked. "Because Ella showed me what real courage looks like." He turned to leave, then paused. "Take care of each other." We watched him walk away for the last time. Ella slipped her hand into mine. "Ready to go back in?" she asked. "Serena's mom is organizing a celebration dinner. Inside the auditorium, families gathered around their children, taking photos with scholarship certificates. Olive stood by the door, giving me a thumbs up. She'd been recording everything, making sure the new oversight systems were working. "You know," Ella said, "we never did get that Thai food." I laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. "Let's get out of here. Dinner's on me." As we walked to the car, I looked back at the school. The old sign had been replaced with a new one. Riverside High, building futures with integrity. "Mom?" Ella paused by the car. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I pulled her into a hug, feeling stronger than I had in months. "We already are."